Welcome to Suited Criminals, where we expose the dark underbelly of corporate America. I'm your host, and today we're diving deep into one of the most shocking pharmaceutical fraud cases of recent years. This is the story of Alexion Pharmaceuticals, a company that built its empire on treating rare diseases, only to corrupt that mission through an elaborate web of bribes, kickbacks, and foreign corruption that would ultimately cost them $855 million in settlements. This is the tale of how a Boston-based biotech giant traded its integrity for international market share, leaving a trail of corrupted doctors, falsified records, and violated patients' trust across 2 continents. Our story begins with Alexion Pharmaceuticals, founded in 1992 by Leonard Bell, a company that initially positioned itself as a beacon of hope for patients suffering from rare and devastating diseases. By 2020, Alexion had grown into a global powerhouse worth over $25 billion, with their flagship drug Soliris generating annual revenues exceeding $3 billion. Soliris, approved by the FDA in 2007, was designed to treat paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria, an ultra-rare blood disorder that affects fewer than 10,000 people worldwide. The drug was revolutionary, literally saving lives, but it came with an astronomical price tag of over $500,000 per patient per year, making it one of the most expensive medications ever developed. This combination of life-saving properties and extreme cost would prove to be both Alexion's greatest asset and the catalyst for their eventual downfall. The corruption scheme that would bring Alexion to its knees operated primarily in Turkey and Brazil, 2 emerging pharmaceutical markets where regulatory oversight was less stringent and the potential for market manipulation was significant. In Turkey, Alexion's subsidiary engaged in a systematic campaign of bribery that began as early as 2010 and continued for nearly a decade. The company identified key physicians, hospital administrators, and government health officials who had influence over drug procurement decisions and treatment protocols. These individuals were then systematically corrupted through a sophisticated network of payments disguised as consulting fees, speaker honoraria, educational grants, and research funding. The amounts involved were staggering, with individual physicians receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars in improper payments, while hospital administrators were offered lucrative contracts for their family members and expensive gifts, including luxury vacations, high-end electronics, and cash payments delivered through intermediaries. The Brazilian operation was even more elaborate and brazen in its scope. Alexion's representatives in Brazil developed what they internally referred to as a customer loyalty program, which was nothing more than a euphemism for a systematic bribery scheme. The company established relationships with patient advocacy groups, medical societies, and individual physicians, providing them with substantial financial incentives to promote Soliris and influence treatment decisions. In one particularly egregious example, Alexion paid over $2 million to a single Brazilian physician over a 5-year period, ostensibly for consulting services, but the reality was that this doctor had become little more than a paid advocate for the company's products. The payments were structured to avoid detection, often flowing through multiple shell companies and intermediaries before reaching their intended recipients. Brazilian health officials responsible for drug approvals and reimbursement decisions were also targets, receiving substantial payments that were carefully disguised as legitimate business expenses. What makes this case particularly disturbing is how Alexion exploited the desperation of patients and families dealing with rare diseases. The company's executives understood that when a medication is literally a matter of life and death, patients and their physicians have little choice but to seek access to treatment regardless of cost or circumstances. This created a captive market that Alexion ruthlessly exploited through their corruption schemes. In Turkey, the company manipulated the national health insurance system by bribing officials responsible for reimbursement decisions, ensuring that Soliris would be covered by government insurance programs despite its extraordinary cost. They also corrupted the medical guidelines development process, paying physicians to include Soliris as a first-line treatment in official medical protocols, effectively guaranteeing market share regardless of whether the drug was the most appropriate treatment option. The mechanics of the bribery scheme were sophisticated and involved multiple layers of obfuscation designed to hide the illegal nature of the payments. Alexion established a network of third-party vendors, consulting companies, and distributors who served as intermediaries for the corrupt payments. These companies would invoice Alexion for legitimate-sounding services such as market research, medical education, or regulatory consulting, when in reality they were simply conduits for bribes. The invoices were often inflated or entirely fabricated, with the excess funds being directed to the ultimate recipients of the bribes. In Brazil, Alexion created an elaborate system of educational grants and research funding that were awarded to medical institutions and physicians based not on scientific merit, but on their willingness to promote Soliris and influence treatment decisions in the company's favor. The company also established patient assistance programs that were ostensibly designed to help patients access treatment, but were actually used as vehicles for channeling money to physicians and healthcare administrators. Internal communications obtained during the Department of Justice investigation revealed the extent to which Alexion's senior management was aware of and actively participated in the corruption scheme. Emails between executives discussed strategies for maintaining relationships with key opinion leaders in target markets, with clear references to the financial incentives being provided. In one particularly damning email exchange, Alexion executives discussed concerns about regulatory scrutiny and the need to be more careful about how payments were structured and documented. Rather than ending the corrupt practices, the company's response was to become more sophisticated in hiding them. The company also maintained detailed spreadsheets tracking payments to individual physicians and healthcare officials, organized by country and influence level, demonstrating the systematic and premeditated nature of the scheme. The beginning of the end for Alexion came in 2017 when a whistleblower within the company's Brazilian operations contacted the Securities and Exchange Commission with detailed information about the bribery scheme. The whistleblower, a former Alexion employee who had been directly involved in implementing the corrupt practices, provided investigators with internal documents, email communications, and financial records that painted a comprehensive picture of the company's illegal activities. The SEC investigation quickly expanded to include the Department of Justice and international regulatory authorities, as investigators realized the scope of the corruption extended far beyond Brazil. The investigation revealed that Alexion had violated the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act on multiple occasions, engaging in systematic bribery across multiple jurisdictions for nearly a decade. As federal investigators dug deeper into Alexion's operations, they uncovered additional evidence of corporate malfeasance that extended beyond the core bribery scheme. The company had maintained false books and records to hide the corrupt payments, created fraudulent invoices to justify suspicious transactions, and systematically misled auditors and regulatory authorities about the nature of their international business activities. Alexion had also failed to implement adequate internal controls to prevent corruption, despite being repeatedly warned by their own compliance officers about the risks associated with their international operations. In some cases, compliance officers who raised concerns about potentially illegal activities were marginalized or reassigned to positions where they would have less oversight over international operations. The legal reckoning for Alexion was swift and severe. In July 2020, the company agreed to pay $465 million to the Department of Justice to resolve criminal charges related to the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act violations. Simultaneously, the company paid an additional $390 million to the Securities and Exchange Commission to settle civil charges related to the same conduct. The total settlement of $855 million represented one of the largest Foreign Corrupt Practices Act settlements in pharmaceutical industry history. As part of the settlement agreement, Alexion admitted to the underlying criminal conduct and agreed to implement comprehensive compliance reforms, including enhanced due diligence procedures for international business partners, improved financial controls and monitoring systems, and regular reporting to federal authorities on their compliance efforts. The Alexion case serves as a stark reminder of how corporate greed can corrupt even the most noble of missions. Here was a company that had developed life-saving treatments for patients with rare and devastating diseases, yet chose to prioritize profits over principles in their quest for international market dominance. The $855 million settlement was just the beginning of Alexion's problems. The company faced additional lawsuits from shareholders who alleged that the corrupt practices had inflated the company's stock price and misled investors about the true nature of their business operations. Several former executives faced personal liability for their roles in the scheme, with some individuals paying substantial fines and being barred from serving as officers or directors of public companies. The reputational damage to Alexion was immense, undermining trust among patients, physicians, and investors who had believed in the company's mission to help those suffering from rare diseases. In December 2020, just months after the settlement, Alexion agreed to be acquired by AstraZeneca for $39 billion, bringing an end to the independent existence of a company that had once been considered a model for rare disease drug development. The Alexion scandal stands as a cautionary tale about the corrosive effects of corporate corruption and the ultimate price that companies pay when they choose short-term profits over long-term integrity.